Hello, everyone. My name is Becca. I am excited for you to go on this book reading journey with me. I am new to this space, and so I thought, that an easy way for you guys to get to know me would be for me to do 26 books I want to read in 2026. I love to read. I love to learn about different cultures and histories and religions, and then also like give recommendations off of those. So that's kind of why I started this channel. I think I have like an interesting taste, a more unique taste in books, and so I am excited to share that with you guys. When I usually read books, I usually read them in like a seasonal format, so like winter books in the winter books that take place in the winter and snow or in the winter. Fall books more like dark academia, mystery, different things like that. Fall. And then in the spring and summer, I just like fill in all the other random books I want to read. So that's kind of the format that I'll be introducing all these books to you guys in. As I said, the first set of books that I'm going to be talking about are my winter theme books. I hope to either finish them in the next couple of weeks or I'll just wait till like November, December to finish them. And the first one that I have is the Sanatorium. I actually finished this last week. I've had it for like a year and a half. It takes place in Switzerland in the Alps, and it's an old sanatorium that has been turned into a hotel, and people just start dying. There's a detective who happens to be there and chases to solve the case. And so the cover looks beautiful to me. I was really excited to read it. I love reading mystery books. And so this was one books that I wanted to read this year, and I already read it. The second book I am currently reading is called Sun and Shadow. It is by a Swedish author. And this book, you'll see a theme with these books. This book is also a detective murder mystery book that takes place in Sweden. I am about 50 pages into it, and I'm not really sure. They're basically just saying the characters, so no murders had happened or anything yet. But I am excited to see where this book goes. The third book that I have that I want to read this year is The Bear and the Nightingale. It takes place in a northern Russian village. And usually I don't read a lot of like fantasy, magic type books, but the name sounded really intriguing. The back sounded really intriguing. I don't know a whole lot about this book, but I believe it's like a caretaker is telling a story to like the family's children, and it's just this magical tale that takes place in winter in Russia. So that sounded really interesting to me. It's written by Catherine Arden. So we'll see what this book entails. The next book that I have is a book called Snow. It's by Orhan Pamuk. He is a Turkish author. He is a really famous Turkish author. I've heard of several of his other books before, and this one sounded really intriguing to me. It takes place in a rural Turkish village, and I like more literary fiction books, and so it's just about life in a rural, more conservative Muslim village. So again, just excited to learn more about a different culture. I used to live in Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan and Turkish culture is very similar, and so this will just be kind of like a taste of where I used to live. And so yeah, looking forward to learning more about Turkish culture, Muslim culture, and like rural culture in a different country. The last book in my like winter section is by Frederick Bachman, and it's The Deal of a Lifetime. I don't know too much about this book, but I read his book Beartown, and I'm currently listening it again with my husband, and I just love it. I gave it 5 stars. I grew up in a small rural town in Minnesota where hockey was very big, and so I just fell in love with that book, Beartown. Um, and so I'm excited to read this book by him. I feel like he does a really good job of articulating people's thoughts and feelings in a really thoughtful way. Um, so yeah, this one I feel like it's more Christmassy than wintry, so this one might end up being a book that I read next December. We'll see. The next chunk of books that I want to read this year, this I'm just gonna call like the childhood favorite section. And so I was homeschooled growing up. I used to read a lot. My dad still has most of our uh, homeschool curriculum books that we'd read. And so these next 4 books are just some of my favorite childhood books. And as I was looking back at them, a lot of them take place in like the Middle East, like a Muslim community, the Middle East, Northern Africa, or they're traveling books. And I think it's really interesting because little Becca loved those type of books. And current Becca, even though I'm not overseas right now, I used to live overseas in Azerbaijan, and our goal is to go back overseas. So I feel like little Becca knew where she kind of wanted to be in the world. So the first book, all that to say, the first book is a book called The Shadow Spinner. I love this book so much. I'm also kind of really nervous to read all these books again. I had never reread a book before, and so I hope that this doesn't ruin the book in my mind. But yes, The Shadow Spinner by Susan Fletcher. This takes place in the Middle East. There is a king and a queen, and the king wants a story every night. And if the queen doesn't deliver on that story, or if the story is not interesting enough, he's going to kill her. And the queen slowly is starting to run out of story material. And this girl knows a story that was like passed down throughout her family. And so she's starting to help the queen. And it was such a fun tale. I still remember bits and pieces of it. So we'll see how it holds up. That's the first one. The second one, I grew up riding horses. I love horses. I still love riding horses. And this is one of my favorite horse books. It's called King of the Wind. It takes place in Morocco. And it is about a horse and his like caretaker, and their just like experiences together. And he also is like a racehorse, as far as I remember. So excited to reread this book. It's King of the Wind by Marguerite Henry. The third book is Seven Daughters and Seven Sons. This one I remember probably the least about in like the childhood series. But as we were just in Minnesota this past week, and I was looking through my dad's books, and when I saw this one, I was like, it just like hit me that I love this book, but I don't quite remember why. And so I am excited to rediscover why I love this book so much. I know it's about a girl who like wants to travel and see the world, but in her culture that wasn't allowed. She also wants to provide for her family, but that also isn't really allowed because women are supposed to stay at home. And so she disguises herself as a man and becomes really successful as a business person. And that's all I can remember. So excited to see and remember what this book is about. It's Seven Daughters and Seven Sons by Barbara Cohen and Bahia Lovejoy. And then the fourth book in this set is Around the World in 80 Days. I just love the concept of this book. I love traveling a lot. As I said earlier, about different histories and cultures. And I feel like this book does that in a dramatic way. I think I read this book twice and listened to the audiobook once before. It was like 10 years ago, though. And so when I saw this at my dad's house, I was like, I need to read this book again. And then as I was looking at all his other bookshelves, I found 3 other copies of this book. So actually, I'm gonna read this book with my mom, 2 sisters, and sister-in-law. So this is our little first book club book we're doing together. And it's by Jules Verne. It's Around the World in 8 Days. The next set of 4 books that I'm going to be talking about, I actually only own one of them right now. And the reason for that is because the first one is Deep Cuts. I believe this book came out last year, and I don't love hardcover books, so I've been trying to find the paperback version of it, and I haven't been able to find it yet. But when I read the back of Deep Cuts, it reminded me a lot of Daisy Jones and the Six, and I read that book last year over the summer and just loved it, gave it 5 stars. There's something about just music and rock and roll and like musicians like passion for just rhythm and writing lyrics and all that kind of stuff that I really love and find it really interesting. Maybe because I'm just not that creative of a person, I just really find it, I'm so intrigued by it. So Deep Cuts is the first book that I want to read in the set. I know it has some romance in it. I don't really know how involved that is. Usually I don't like to read romance books, but the theme seems interesting enough that I'll read it anyway. I also usually don't like to read super modern books or super popular books, but again, Deep Cuts just sound really interesting to me, so it'll have an exception. The next book that I'm going to be reading is Just Friends by Haley Pham. It hasn't come out yet, so that's why I don't have it. And it comes out on March 3rd of this year. I went back and forth between whether or not I wanted to read her book, because I know it's a romance book. But when I saw the opportunity to meet her, so she's like going on a book tour right now. Well, she will be, and she's going to New York, Chicago, and then 2 places in Texas. And she happens to be in Chicago on March 3rd of this year, like the exact day that her book will be released. And that same day, my husband and I are already going to be in Chicago. And so when I saw that connection, I was like, I need to go. Like, it's perfect. And so I get to go to her like book tour. I'll get to meet her, get a signed copy of her book. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see her first novel. So that's the second book. The third book in the set, different vein, is called The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I am going to be reading this with 2 of my best friends, and the concept of this book is really interesting to me because it, from what I understand, it is like an older, wiser demon advising and talking to a younger demon on how to like corrupt the human race. I think that's right. And I just really like C.S. Lewis's works. I've never read this before, and yeah, the concept is just really interesting, and it's kind of from like a backwards perspective on how, like, yeah, I don't know really what it's gonna be about, but I'm excited for it. I found this book. Oh, actually, this book was given to me, but I usually like to buy books at thrift stores, and I think they just add more, I don't know, they're cheaper, more affordable. They just have more history to them. Well, there's the word character to them. And this book, I feel like, just has a lot of character with it. So yeah, this is the next book. And then the fourth book in the set is called The House on Mango Street. One of the reasons why I want to read this book is because it takes place in Chicago, and my husband and I are currently going to Chicago every week for medical stuff. and it's about this Latina girl just growing up in Chicago, and just seems kind of like a sweet little fun read since we're getting to know Chicago a lot. The next set of books that I'm going to be talking about is inspired by kind of a lifetime goal that I have. I want to read a book from every country. In theory, it'd be like it would take place in that country, but I want to read a book written by an author from every country. And so this is my like cultural segment, I guess. And the first book that I have is called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And I already want to read more Soviet style books. As I said earlier, I used to live in Azerbaijan, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, and I just find Soviet culture really interesting. I love history, and I feel like that time, especially in Azerbaijan, was a really interesting, fascinating time. And so I also wanted to read more Russian literature. And this falls into both of those categories. So that's why I chose this book. And it is about a boy or a man called Ivan. And he's a carpenter in the Soviet Union. And he gets taken to work in one of their camps. And it kind of just talks about his life in the camps and the people he meets. And yeah, I'm just excited to learn more about that time, learn more about the Gulag, Soviet life, and just, yeah, I feel like as someone who grew up in the US, I heard about the Soviet Union, but I didn't really learn too much more about it. And so I am just looking forward to learning more about the Soviet Union. The next book in my cultural set is called The Turtle of Oman. It's by Naomi Shihab Nye. And I'm not sure if this author is from Oman or not, so maybe it'll count towards my goal to read a book from a country, maybe not. But it is about a boy named Arif who is from Oman and he does not want to move. His family is moving to Michigan, and it's about his final days in Oman and his grandfather kind of consoling him. And so I found this book at a thrift store. I love shopping at thrift stores for books. There's always so many hidden treasures there. And I found this book after we recently moved back, and we moved back for medical reasons, and so that was like it's hard to process all that. And I feel like this book touched me, and that he also didn't want to move and go. So yeah, I'm curious how this book will go. It's written for children, but I think it'll be good for me too. The next book is called 3 Cups of Tea. It's written by Greg Mortensen and David Oliver Rellin. And when I saw the cover of this book, it instantly stood out to me because overseas, especially in Azerbaijan and that area of the world, there's such a tea drinking culture. I have tea, we call it chai over there, like 5 times a day. You're always drinking chai. And so I will just read like a little segment of the back cover. It says, here, so it takes place in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here, we drink 3 cups of tea to do business. The first, you are a stranger. The second, you become a friend. And the third, you join our family. And for our family, we are prepared to do anything, even die. And I feel like I experienced that in my time overseas. The people who I met were so kind, so hospitable, so welcoming, so generous with their time and how they wanted to care for you. So this book, just off of like that little insight, I was like, oh, just for the memories, I need to read this book. But the story itself is about a man who moves to Pakistan, Afghanistan to start a school. And it's about his like journey in starting the school and wanting to teach women in that environment. So yeah, looking forward to reading this book. The next book that I want to read is called The Soul of Iran. It's by Afshin Molavi, and he is from Iran. And one of the things that really drew me to this book is the Iranian Revolution. I feel like I don't know a lot about it. I've read some information on it, and because Azerbaijan and Iran are border countries, I've also learned more about Iranian history that way. But I just really enjoy learning about the Middle East, Western Asia. That history is so fascinating to me. It's so deep, it's so rich. It goes back thousands of years. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose this book. I found it at a thrift store. It was the deal of the day was like buy a book for a quarter, get the other one free. So it's hard to pass up books when they're only a quarter and free. But yeah, I don't know exactly what this book is about. I thought it was more of a literary fiction, but I think it is just about the author as he travels throughout his homeland gathering stories. And so I think there's just several short stories in this book. Stay tuned. I'm not sure. The next book I have on my Nook, not a Kindle, but like my little Nook device. And this is a book that I am really nervous to read. I don't love to read popular books. I get nervous that they're too hyped and they won't actually be as interesting as they're supposed to be, or that, yeah, people are just really biased because it might be a famous author. And in this case, it is a famous author. In the book I'm referring to is The Kite Runner. Of course, it's written by Khaled Hosseini. I have read his 3 other books. I've read A Thousand Splendid Suns. I've read On the Mount, The Echo of the Mountain, something like that, and then Sea Prayer. And I just looked on Goodreads and I gave those 3 books all 5 stars. So there's no reason why I shouldn't have already read this book. But I'm really nervous because it's his most famous book. And I just don't know what's going to happen. I know that it's about a friendship between 2 boys and their life in Afghanistan. But that's about all I know. I know his other books are really emotional, very deep. They don't shy away from hard subjects. So I'm assuming that this will happen in this book too. I'm probably gonna cry. I feel like I cried in 2 of his 3 other books. So I will have to make sure that I read this book when I am in a good mental space. The next book that I'm gonna hopefully read this year is a book written by Alexander McCall Smith, and it's called In the Company of Cheerful Ladies. And I'm really hoping that this is like a happy book, because I feel like maybe you've noticed I like to read heavier books, more thought provoking, real life, cultural, literary fiction books. And I own one of his other books. Unfortunately, it's overseas, so I haven't been able to read it yet. But I'm really excited for this book. One, because I'll work for my book club of wanting to read a book from every country, but also because in 2016 I went to Botswana for the summer, which is where this book takes place. And the first book, I think this is book 3 or 4 in the series, but I don't think that, kind of like Agatha Christie, I don't think you need to read them in order. But it's about these ladies, and they're more elderly ladies, and they're detectives, and they like to solve cases around Botswana. And so I'm assuming that's what the Cheerful Ladies is referring to, and I think it'll just be a fun little lighthearted, probably murder detective case. But yeah, definitely looking forward to reading this book just based off of the title and like the vibrant colors of it. The last book that is in this like cultural set is called The Zookeeper's War. And I saw this book at a secondhand bookshop and was very intrigued by it. It takes place during the Cold War, and it takes place in Berlin, but during that time, Berlin was separated into East and West Berlin. And apparently there was like a zookeeper war that was going on in the city where they were trying to have animals and the best trainers go to one zoo, but then the other zoo wanted the best, and it's just like there was a fight over where the animals would go. And other countries got involved too. So other countries, depending on which side, East or West Berlin, they would send animals and trainers and just supplies to help support those zoos. And that sounded really interesting to me. At one point in my life, I wanted to be a vet and I wanted to work at a zoo. So I think this book has extra appeal to me. And also, it says it's an incredible true story from the Cold War. So, yeah, it's fun that it is based on real events that actually happened. The next set of books that I'm going to be talking about, this will wrap up my 26 books. I believe we're on book 20 right now. We're going to be talking about book 20. So we have 6 left in this stack. And these are the books I want to read in the fall. I like to read classic books, literary fiction books, mysteries, Agatha Christie, all those types of books in the fall. And so the first one that I really want to read is Frankenstein. There's kind of a story with this one. My husband and his parents and I, we were in St. Louis last year doing an escape room, and it was Frankenstein themed. And I didn't really know much about Frankenstein, and so I started researching for the escape room and thought it was really interesting. And that led to me wanting to read the actual book itself. So I bought a copy. It was like a beautiful leather bound. I got like the fancy one, just because it's a classic and I feel like I'll want to look back on it. But unfortunately, that one went overseas, and around the same time, we moved back here. So one of my dear friends bought me this copy of Frankenstein, and I think that is just so beautiful. The art is like watercolor. I don't know, it's painted really beautifully, has gold edges, and then there are several images and photos throughout the book as well. For some reason, I thought I honestly didn't really know what the Frankenstein story was about. So yeah, just excited to learn more about such a classic book. And this book goes along with the next book that I want to read, which is Poor Things. It's kind of like a newer version of Frankenstein, but the main character is a girl named Bella Baxter. And apparently it just follows similar themes to this book, only in a girl form, and they like give this girl a brain, but it's the brain of like an infant, so her thought process isn't fully developed, and she can have tantrums and different things like that throughout the book. I just thought it was really interesting. Emma Stone is in the movie version of this, and I like watching her movies, so that was one reason why I wanted to read this book before I watched the movie. And also Frankenstein just got a new film done of it, so I'm excited to read both of these and then watch some movies this fall. The next book that I'm going to hopefully read this year is The Black Rose of Florence by Michel Guattari. And I have read one of his other books, and I think I gave it like a 4.5. I really, really enjoyed it. And one of the most intriguing things for me about this book is a detective type series that takes place in the Florence area. And I love Italy. I studied abroad in Florence, and when we lived overseas, we were able to go to Italy a couple of different times because we found really cheap flights. So, love Italian culture, the food, the history, everything about Italy. This book, or the other book in the series that I read, was super interesting. But I just need to read a little blurb about the author because he's so intriguing. And it says the author was born in Rome in 1950. He was the head of the Florence police force in 1995 to 2003, where he was responsible for reopening the Monster of Florence case and jailing several key mafia figures. He is now a special advisor to the Interior Minister in Rome with a remit to monitor mafia activity. So the detective is writing detective books. And something that's kind of a side note, I didn't add this book to the list, but I saw on Netflix that there's this whole series on the Monster of Florence, and that really intrigued me. And then a couple days later, I went to a thrift store and found the book Monster of Florence. And so here it is. So maybe this will be a 2-part like book set. We'll see. But I am excited to read more of this author's books because he just does a really good job of explaining the processes that a detective has to go through. And you can just tell he obviously really knows his stuff. The next book for fall that I want to read is called The Dante Club. Again, anything related to Italy, I'm already intrigued by, and I almost added just Dante's books in general to the list of books I want to read this year, but I didn't. And this book, the story, it takes place in Boston in 1865, and there's a series of murders that happen based off of Dante's work. So they're tied to his work in some way, and the detectives have to like go in, read Dante's work, and then tie it to like the murders to find the main killer. So I thought that was really interesting. Definitely like a spooky book for the fall. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. The last 2 books, so book 25 and 26, and the books that I want to read this year, are part of a series that I just heard about. I know it's probably been popular for a while now, but it's new to me, and it is part of the Southern Reach series. I read the first 2 books in it last year. I read Annihilation and then Authority. I devoured Annihilation. I read it in like 2 days. It is a pretty short, thin book, but I read it in like 2 days. Just, it grabbed my attention. It's kind of like an environmental futuristic book. And it's not really realistic in some aspects. And so usually I'm not really into fantasy books, but because it was more futuristic, it leaned heavier on the futuristic side. It was very intriguing for me. So read the first one, loved it. The second one, I feel like the last fourth was really interesting, and the first chunk of it, you kind of are just learning about a new character, and it's just like setting up the system. But it ended on a cliffhanger, and that's what book 3 is about. So I'm really excited to read Acceptance, and then I believe in 2024 Absolution came out, and I believe that's it for the whole set. So yeah, I'm really excited to read both of these. Jeff Vandermeer is the author. They just came out with new art for all his books. It's really shiny and reflective, which I feel like reflects the vibe of the environmental anomalies really well. But yeah, those are the final 2 books in my set for 2026. So that's all I have. Hopefully you thought at least 1 or 2 of those books sounded interesting to you. I'm excited to read them all this next year. And hopefully that kind of gives you more like a look into like who I am and what I like to do and the things that I enjoy. I am hoping to release at least one video every month, with different themes. I'm this is random. I'm currently learning Norwegian, and so there's going to be a series on uh books from Norway. I have lots of plans for like the fall and winter 'cause those are my favorite seasons. Um, but yeah, I hope to have different people join me on the channel too. So if you thought this was interesting, if you like the books, stay tuned, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and hopefully I'll see you back soon. Bye, thanks.